My life savings disappeared in the time it takes to refresh a screen. I was standing in the driveway of my brother in law, Kevin, shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins, when his front door didn't just open, it detonated. A sound like a cannon blast echoed through the peaceful suburban street, and the door imploded into a cloud of splintered wood and drywall. Before I could even process the shock, two men dressed in head to toe black tactical gear charged through the gaping hole where the door used to be. It was in that moment I understood that the massive unauthorized withdrawal from my bank account was just a panicked down payment, and the real collectors had arrived. Just a week before this nightmare began, we were all pretending to be a happy family. The annual gathering was at a luxury chalet we'd rented in Lake Tahoe, a postcard perfect setting that was anything but. It was the first time my husband Daniel's entire family had been under one roof in years, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. The week was a masterclass in forced smiles and conversations that went nowhere. It was a parade of inside jokes I was never privy to, and a suffocating atmosphere of unspoken history. And as always, I was the designated bank. My career in software development meant I was the successful one, and in Daniel's family, my success was treated as a public utility. So I paid. I paid the $4,000 rental fee for the sprawling A-frame chalet. I paid the $700 for a grocery haul from a specialty market, filling the pantry with artisanal cheeses and craft beer they'd devour without a word of thanks. I paid to fill the gas tank of the ski boat not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. And I picked up the tab for a $600 dinner at a lakeside restaurant, all while listening to my brother-in-law, Kevin, and his wife, Sarah, weave elaborate tales of their financial struggles, how they were just one unexpected bill away from total disaster. I never pushed back. I told myself it was what you did for family. You help when you can. You support those who are down on their luck. It was a comforting story, I told myself, a lie that painted my role as noble benefactor rather than the family doormat they saw me as. That illusion came to a violent end the second we got back to our quiet house in Denver. I was completely spent, physically and emotionally exhausted from a week of performing. I dropped my keys on the granite countertop, the clatter echoing in the silence, and collapsed onto the living room sofa. As I always did after a big trip, I pulled out my phone to check my accounts, bracing myself for the financial hit. I expected to be down by $5,000 or $6,000. That would have been a relief. What I saw instead felt like a physical blow, a perfect, clean, absolute zero. The balance read $0.00. My mind couldn't even comprehend the number. It was a foreign symbol from another reality. A wave of dizziness and nausea swept over me. My hands started to shake as I fumbled to open the transaction history. And there it was, laid out like an autopsy report of my financial life. A string of brutal high-dollar transfers, one after another, executed with merciless speed. $5,000, $7,000, another $8,000, a final transfer that drained the remaining $2,000. My entire nest egg, built from years of late nights, missed vacations, and disciplined saving, had been bled dry in a few minutes. This wasn't the work of some anonymous hacker across the globe. The precision of it, the timing felt personal. This was an inside job. "Chloe, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost," Daniel's voice cut through my fog of panic. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I just turned the phone towards him, my hand trembling so badly the screen was a blur. "It's gone," I finally whispered, my voice a raw, broken thing. "Daniel, every penny, it's all gone." He was by my side in an instant, his own phone already in his hand. He furiously logged into his own banking app. A second later, he looked up, his face a mixture of relief and dawning horror. His accounts were fine. His inheritance, his personal savings, all of it was untouched. The theft had been surgical. The thief hadn't hit our family, they had hit me. The call to the bank was a descent into a special kind of hell, a labyrinth of automated menus and cheerful, tinny hold music that seemed to mock my rising terror. With every passing second, the dread twisted tighter in my gut. How could this have happened? Who would do this? My mind raced, replaying every moment of the trip at the lake, searching for a lapse in judgment, a moment of weakness. Then finally, a customer service representative came on the line and delivered the killing blow. Ma'am, I can confirm the transfers. The largest one was sent through a peer-to-peer payment platform. According to our records, the recipient's account is under the name Kevin Peterson. Kevin, my husband's brother. The floor dropped out from under me. The room seemed to spin, the walls warping. I saw his face at the lake, his easy grin, his constant theatrical complaints about being broke. And then the memory hit me with the force of a physical impact. The moment he'd asked to borrow my phone, "Hey, my phone died," he'd said with that lazy, charming smile he used so effectively. "Can I just use yours for a sec? I need to look up the score for the Rockies game." I hadn't thought twice. I unlocked it and handed it over. In that moment, he must have shoulder-surfed my passcode, or maybe he'd watched me type in my banking PIN at the grocery store. It didn't matter how he'd done it. The betrayal was the same. He had slept under a roof I paid for, eaten food I bought, and smiled in my face, all while plotting to completely dismantle my financial security. A different emotion began to push through the panic. It was a cold, hard rage, a feeling so intense it was almost clarifying. It burned away my fear and left behind a core of pure, unadulterated fury. I robotically thanked the bank agent and hung up. Before Daniel could say a word, I was dialing Sarah's number. She answered with her usual bright sing-song hello, but the second the words bank account left my lips, her tone shifted. It became guarded, defensive, and cold. There was no shock, no worry for me. There was only the stale, heavy sound of guilt. She mumbled something and handed the phone to him. Hearing Kevin's voice, thick with that familiar, condescending arrogance, was like throwing gasoline on a fire. "Chloe, hey, look, I was gonna call you," he began, his tone so infuriatingly casual it made my blood boil. "We just had a few things we needed to clear up. It's not a huge deal for you, you know? You're in a different stratosphere. Just think of it as a contribution to the family fund. You'll earn it back in no time." A contribution to the family fund. He hadn't just stolen from me, he had rebranded his crime as a form of charity. In his twisted worldview, my money was his by right. I wasn't his sister-in-law, I was a natural resource he was entitled to exploit. "If you needed money, Kevin, you ask for it," I said, my voice dangerously quiet and steady. "You don't steal. You didn't just steal money. You stole our future. That was the down payment for our house." He laughed, not a nervous chuckle, but a full dismissive laugh that dripped with a decade of disrespect. And that was when I truly understood. He wasn't afraid. He didn't think there would be any consequences. He saw me as the emotional pushover who would cry and complain for a week before ultimately letting it go to keep the peace in the family. He thought he had already won. He had no idea how wrong he was. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, his eyes wide with alarm as I snatched my purse and keys from the counter. "Chloe, stop. Where are you going? Let's just call the police. We can handle this the right way." But there was no right way anymore. The right way was what had gotten me here. The right way was being the bigger person, which everyone else interpreted as being a doormat. There was no talking, no rational discussion to be had. There was only a singular burning need for him to see, up close, what he had done. The drive across Denver to his cookie-cutter suburban neighborhood was a red haze. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my mind a storm of cold, precise anger. A police report would get lost in bureaucracy and family politics. This required something more immediate. This wasn't about the $22,000 anymore. It was about the violation. It was about wiping that smug, entitled smirk off his face. I killed the engine in front of his house, the sudden silence of the evening feeling heavy and ominous. Warm light spilled from the windows. I could faintly hear a sitcom laugh track. They were in there, comfortable, safe, completely unconcerned with the devastation they had unleashed on my life. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. I walked up his stone pathway, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was a vessel for righteous fury. I raised my fist, ready to hammer on his door and shatter his peaceful stolen evening. But before my hand could make contact, the world ripped apart. The explosion wasn't just a noise, it was a physical force that hit me in the chest, stealing my breath. The front door vanished, replaced by a swirling vortex of dust and debris. The concussive wave staggered me back on the manicured lawn. My brain stuttered, refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. I had come here for a confrontation, but I had not come prepared for this. Two men, built like industrial freezes and clad in black from their boots to their balaclavas, moved through the smoking hole in the wall with a terrifying economy of motion. They weren't angry or chaotic. They were professionals. Their calm, brutal efficiency made my own white-hot rage feel like a child's tantrum. I was frozen on the pristine grass, a deer in the headlights of a freight train. Inside, the scene dissolved into raw chaos. Kevin barely had time to look up from his comfortable recliner before one of the men was on him. He hauled Kevin to his feet by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the wall with a deep, wet thud that vibrated through the floor. Sarah shrieked and lunged for her phone on an end table, but the second man moved with inhuman speed. He backhanded the phone out of her reach, sending it skittering across the polished hardwood floor like a frightened animal. "Where is our money?" the man holding Kevin growled, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that promised a world of pain. Kevin, the man who had been so smug and condescending on the phone an hour ago, was now a pale, trembling mess. His eyes were wide with a primal terror that was almost pitiful to watch. "What money? I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice cracking into a pathetic squeak. "Wrong answer." The words were flat, clinical. They were followed by a short, vicious punch to Kevin's gut. He collapsed, all the air rushing out of him in a choked gasp, and slid down the wall, wheezing and clutching his stomach. I took an involuntary step back, the cool night air feeling like a sheet of ice against my skin. The horrifying truth began to assemble itself in my mind. My brother-in-law wasn't just a petty thief who preyed on his family. He was a complete and utter fool who had stolen from people far more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. People who didn't file reports with the fraud department, people who collected their debts in person with staggering interest rates. In my blinding rage, I had failed to consider the obvious. My stolen life savings were never meant to be a windfall for him. They were a desperate, futile attempt to buy time from predators. The second intruder, the one who had dealt with Sarah, slowly turned his head, the dark, empty eye holes of his balaclava fixed on me, standing just outside the threshold of destruction. He tilted his head, a gesture that was both curious and deeply threatening. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. My mouth was as dry as sand. I'm here for my money," I heard myself say, the words sounding utterly ridiculous in the face of this new reality. A dark, humorless chuckle rumbled from deep in his chest. "Get in line," he grunted, dismissing me and turning his attention back to the horror unfolding in the living room. An icy knot of dread formed in my stomach. Whatever Kevin owed these men, it was terrifyingly clear that the $22,000 he had stolen from me was nothing more than pocket change to them. He hadn't just put me in financial jeopardy, he had used my money to try and bail himself out of a situation that was going to get him killed. "Please," Kevin sobbed from the floor, his voice thick with tears and mucus. "I can get it. I swear to you, I just need a little more time." The leader grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back to his feet. "Time's up," he sneered, shoving Kevin toward the middle of the room. The two men moved like a contained hurricane, overturning a coffee table, sending a cascade of magazines and family photos crashing to the floor. Sarah scrambled forward, crying hysterically. "Leave him alone, please!" The second man simply shoved her back with one arm, not even looking at her, and she stumbled and fell in a heap near the splintered remains of her front door. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get in my car and drive until the city was a distant memory. This was not my fight. Kevin had made his bed of nails, and now he was being forced to lie in it. But then I thought of Daniel. I thought of the thousands of hours of my life, the sacrifices, the dreams, all of it vaporized by this pathetic man now whimpering on the floor. "Wait!" The word ripped out of my throat, raw and loud. I took a deliberate step over the ruined threshold into the wreckage of their lives, holding my hands up in a gesture of surrender. "Wait, I have no idea what he owes you, and frankly, I don't care. But he stole my money before he stole yours, $22,000. The leader turned his full, menacing attention on me. He was built like a refrigerator, and his stare was heavy and analytical. He was sizing me up, calculating, trying to determine if I was a complication, a target, or an opportunity. "He stole from you?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of morbid curiosity. "Yes," I said, my own voice finding a surprising reservoir of strength. "He transferred $22,000 out of my savings account less than 2 hours ago. I drove here to get it back." The man let out another one of those short, sharp, mirthless laughs. "Lady, he owes us $300,000. The number hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. 300,000. This was so far beyond my world, it might as well have been a billion. I had a choice. I could turn around, walk away, and chalk up my 22,000 as the price of the most valuable lesson I would ever learn, or I could gamble. I took a deep breath, my mind suddenly clear, the hot rage replaced by a strange, icy calm. "Look at him," I said, gesturing to the blubbering, broken form of my brother-in-law. "You and I both know you are not getting $300,000 from that man tonight. He's worthless. He doesn't have it. But what he does have right now is my money. My 22,000 is sitting in his checking account. It is the only real liquid cash you are going to get your hands on. Let me get it back. I walk away from here. I forget everything I saw. I say nothing to anyone. You get a $22,000 down payment on your loss, and you can have what's left, him included." I watched the cold, brutal calculus of my proposal work its way across his hidden features. My money was the bird in the hand. It was real. It was there. It was a tangible victory in a situation that was rapidly turning into a total loss for them. "Fine," he said at last, the decision made with chilling speed. He jerked his head toward Kevin, who was still on the floor. "Get it. You try one funny thing, and you become part of his outstanding debt." He let go of Kevin, who slumped to the floor like a discarded marionette. Under the silent, predatory gaze of the two intruders, I walked over to my brother-in-law. "Your phone," I commanded, my voice completely flat, devoid of any emotion at all. "Open your banking app, transfer it back, every cent now." With trembling, clumsy fingers, his face a grotesque mask of tears and snot, Kevin pulled out his phone. I stood over his shoulder, a grim supervisor to my own financial recovery, as he navigated to his account. And there it was, my money, my $22,000 sitting in his account. He initiated the transfer back to me. I stood there motionless, my own phone clutched in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs until, after what felt like an hour, a notification chimed. The funds were back. "It's done," I said, stepping away from him as if he were radioactive. I didn't look at Sarah, who was still weeping by the door. I didn't look at Kevin, who was now completely at the mercy of the men he had tried to swindle. Their business with him was far from over. They had come for a pound of flesh, and they were not about to leave with only $22,000 in cash. As I stepped back out into the cool, quiet night, the sounds from inside the house shifted. The begging and pleading stopped. A new, more terrible sound started, a series of dull, rhythmic impacts that made my stomach churn. I did not look back. I walked to my car with a steady, robotic pace. I got in, turned the key, and drove away, the chaos and violence in that house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was just another anonymous light in the sprawling suburban darkness. I had my money back, but the cost was immeasurable. I had driven to that house seeking a simple kind of justice for a simple family betrayal. I drove away a silent accomplice to the brutal accounting of the criminal underworld. I learned a terrible lesson that night. Some debts are not paid in dollars and cents. Some betrayals carve out a piece of your soul that you can never get back. The numbers in my bank account had been restored to their former state, but the ledger of my life, the one that tracked things like trust and family and faith in the goodness of people, was permanently in the red. My balance had been zeroed out in a way that no deposit could ever fix.